Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah, and today we are talking about switching plants back from leca into soil. If you are new here, welcome. I talk about plants, plant-related content, and a little bit about semi-hydroponics. So if that's of interest to you, take a moment, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so that you can be notified every time I post a new video. So, like I said, today's video is talking about switching plants back from semi-hydroponics back into soil. Now, if you've been around my channel for a while, you know I am a huge fan of semi-hydroponics. With my busy schedule, with all of my Hoyas, they seem to love it. So why am I making a switch back from leca into soil? Now, the plant in particular that I am switching back is my variegated Maranta plant. Now, this is the same plant that I actually used in my video where I talked about how to convert a plant into semi-hydroponics. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why I'm going to choose to go ahead and switch this plant back into soil. Now, as you can see, this plant isn't doing terribly poorly. It's not dying. It's not looking in any danger. It just isn't doing the best. I would rather it was doing a little bit better. And I'll go ahead and show you where this plant was sitting, and I'll show you my other prayer plant so that you can kind of have a comparison point and see why maybe I'm going to go ahead and make this switch. All right, so as you can see, it's not doing horribly. It's got some brown tips here, and it's got some new growth. You can see new leaf coming in right there. Couple new leaves. This one's a new leaf and a new leaf coming in there. Some more brown tips. So it's not dying per se, but it does have those kind of brown edges, and it is sitting right next to my humidifier. This one I usually run most of the night. So it's not doing horribly. It's just not thriving. And I'm going to take you over to my other Maranta, which gets almost the exact same conditions. It's on the other end of this kitchen counter, and the other one is just doing so much better. So I think that was kind of the reason I thought I might switch this one back into soil. All right, so here is my other Maranta. It's getting very, very similar conditions, maybe just a tiny, tiny bit more light, but not a whole lot. They're both on the same kitchen counter, just on kind of separate ends. And as you can see, this one is doing so much better. This one has bigger leaves and more new leaves coming in there. And you can see just a couple of brown tips, and they tend to be on the oldest of the leaves. They don't tend to be kind of here through the main part of the plant. And this one is in soil, has been in soil. I've taken divisions off of this one, and this one just thrives here. So I'm going to go ahead and switch that variegated Maranta back into soil and see if I can get it looking a little bit closer to how this Maranta looks. So those are the reasons I'm going to go ahead and switch this plant back. Overall, I haven't had great success with anything in the prayer plant family doing well in leca. They don't die, they don't necessarily not do well, they're just not doing great. They tend to do a little bit better for me in soils. So that's why I'm kind of making this decision to switch this one back to soil. I'd rather it looked a little bit more like that red prayer plant. So a few things for you to consider if you are contemplating switching a plant back from leca into soil. The first thing that I would recommend is making sure you're giving your plants enough time to actually adjust to the leca in the first place. It's a whole process, and it's really easy to freak out when your plant starts to lose some leaves or not look so great for the first couple of months. Now, this plant has been in leca for quite a while, probably over 6 months now, and it's not really doing a whole lot better. At that point, I would expect to see all of the kind of dead growth, the stuff that's just not thriving and not adjusted to the leca, to have died off already, and for it to be putting out new and good new growth. And while it certainly is still growing and putting on new growth, as you could see in the close-up video, it's just not thriving in the way that I want it to. So since it has been an extended amount of time, it's most likely that it's not thriving in its leca environment.
One other thing you might want to contemplate before making the switch back is if there were other conditions that might be affecting it that aren't the LECA. For instance, is it getting a draft? Is it getting too much or not enough light? Things like that. And that's why I went ahead and showed you that red Maranta. They're getting very, very similar conditions. They are close to each other in my house. So it's not really a lighting condition or a temperature condition when it's so close to another almost identical plant that is doing a whole lot better. Another thing to keep in mind when you make the switch back to soil, if you choose to make that switch, is that it's going to go through that same conversion process all over again, which is why you don't want to jump the gun and do it after just a month or two of having it in LECA. Making the conversion process too often can have a negative effect on the plant. It basically has to kill off all of its old roots that are adjusted to whatever its medium is and grow in new ones that are adjusted to the LECA or the soil or whatever. So if you make that switch too often or too quickly after making another switch, you might end up actually killing your plant or at least seriously stunting its growth. So the conversion process is going to be very similar to planting up any sort of plant that has been in maybe a water medium or just planting a plant into soil in general. There's no special steps that you need to take other than I would recommend your roots are very used to being in water. So similar to propagating a plant in water, when you plant it back in the soil, maybe keep it a little bit extra moist for the next couple of days. I'm going to go ahead and do a full rehab on this plant, planting it up into soil, chopping off some of these dead leaves, and then I will come back and I will show you my final product.
Okay, so this is the potting mix I'm using to pot up this Maranta today. There's some black gold, some perlite, and some orchid bark, but it is not at all a chunky mix. It is definitely a little bit heavier on that potting mix. Just because it is a Maranta, it's going to want to stay a little bit wetter through the week. So there's still some chunkiness in there so that the roots don't rot, but it's definitely a much denser mix than I would be potting up some of my aroids or my Hoyas in. Okay, and here are the roots. So as you can see, not doing really poorly, but I can see and actually smell a little tiny bit of rot, I think kind of here in the center section where it's really densely packed. I do think that maybe it's just not doing the best that it could be, but you can see lots and lots of new growth points here. So I do think it was doing all right in its LECA, but maybe just not as great as it could be. So I'm going to go ahead and continue with the switch, even though I do see some new growth points here. Like I said, I would really like to get it looking similar to how my red Maranta looks. Okay, so here is the plant after it's been converted back. So as you can see, I've given it a nice water. Actually put some water on the leaves too. And I cut off some of the dead ends just so I can get a better idea of what's going on with this plant. And I actually moved it here into my plant room so it'll get a little bit more light. Normally, I wouldn't recommend kind of doing so much to your plant, especially if you're just kind of experimenting with semi-hydroponics. You really want to change one variable at a time, kind of get an idea of what's going on. But in this case, I do know that there is some new growth coming in down there. I do wonder if some of this is actually fertilizer burn, if it didn't like being sat in so much of the nutrients being in the semi-hydroponics, even though I only did that every couple of weeks. So we'll see. Like I said, I'm kind of experimenting too with this process, but this one, while it wasn't doing poorly, it just didn't seem to be thriving, didn't seem to be putting out bigger leaves, actually tended to put out kind of smaller leaves. So we're going to see, and I will update you guys in a little bit on how it's doing.
Okay, so hopefully you guys enjoyed seeing a little bit of that process and a little bit of my thought process behind why I'm switching that particular plant back. Like I said, I still love semi-hydroponics. My Hoyas and all of my philodendrons are actually doing really, really well in the semi-hydro. My little Atabapoense, I'm looking over on the shelf, is going nuts and putting out huge leaves. So everything's doing pretty well in the semi-hydro. Just this particular plant, while it wasn't doing poorly, also wasn't doing well, and that plant is a particularly beautiful plant. I didn't want to just let it kind of keep floundering. I want to encourage bigger, better growth, maybe some more variegation on it, so we'll see if that helps. So I do want to encourage you guys, if you are just starting out with semi-hydroponics, it is a journey, and there's definitely some kind of stick with it and live through the transition phase. But it's also okay to acknowledge that maybe certain plants don't do well in semi-hydro, and you might find that for you those plants differ. I know some people who cannot grow philodendrons in semi-hydroponics, that don't do well for them. So just kind of do some experimenting, especially with plants that you don't mind if they don't do well for a while. And just figure out what works for you with your schedule for caring for your plants, how much you are feeding them, those kinds of things. And if it's not working in semi-hydroponics, don't be afraid to switch it back into soil and see if it does a little better that way. Worst case scenario, you just take a cutting from that plant and start all over again, right? So as always, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, go ahead, leave me a thumbs up, letting me know you like this kind of video and that you'd like to see more along these lines. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next week with another video. Bye.